What's up, Cerebral football fans? My name is Steven Hyder. This is Gate City Sports Channel. So we're here to talk about the defense today, guys. On Monday, we talked about the offense a little bit. We talked about some of the newcomers coming in, what might come of the new system that's being brought there. So today, we're gonna talk about Vic Fangio, Clint Hurtt, and these guys coming in, right? We have a new set of coaches coming into the fold here with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the first thing we have to talk about when it comes to this defense is we know that we have tried to implement the Vic Fangio system now for years. I mean, we had a guy that is kind of now being linked and said as part of the Vic Fangio coaching tree, which I find to be hilarious and funny because he's not. In the fact that Jonathan Gannon was not a Vic Fangio guy prior to arriving here in Philly. I think everyone forgets he was underneath Eberflus, and then before that he was underneath Mike Zimmer. But I mean, he ran the Fangio system because that's what we wanted to run here in Philadelphia. So he kind of bent and twisted it to what he wanted to do. But now we actually have the man himself in the building, along with Clint Hurtt, a former, Seattle defensive coordinator and, defensive line coach, with Christian Parker out there coaching the secondary. We know that. And Joe Kasper coming in to coach the secondary, safeties in particular. So what I know of this coaching group right from the jump is it looks like they're going to remake the back end of the defense, right? I mean, you brought Vic Fangio in to get things right. We know that Fangio is going to start with a quarters concept, but within that quarters concept, guys, we are going to have a lot of cover 6, cover 8 kind of concepts. So cover 6 and cover 8, the only thing you need to know about it, guys, is it's quarter and half coverages. So cover 6 is when your quarters is to the strong side of your offense. So you're playing quarters above the strong side of the offense, and then cover 8 is when you're playing half towards the strong side. But it's a split field coverage, so half of the field's playing quarters, half the field's playing cover 2. The differences between 6 and 8 are small like that, to be honest. I would say right from the jump, we have a big decision looming in the secondary. I think there's a lot of difficult decisions to be made as I kind of look over the roster, right? That back 7, from the linebackers all the way out to those safeties, the back 7 of this defense is kind of complicated right now. It's really complicated to predict what is going to happen here in Philadelphia. Because as I have it written down, these are the guys that I know are under contract. And I could be missing somebody. Mind you, under contract does not mean that they will be a part of the 53-man roster when we kick off the 24 season in apparently Brazil. But Reed Blankenship is under contract. Sidney Brown is under contract. Currently, Kevin Byard is under contract. And I think, check on me on this one. I'm pretty sure Tristan McCollum got either a futures deal or he's still under contract. And then when you move out to the secondary, there's a long list of names. But I don't know who's going to shake out when it's all said and done. So Darius Slade, James Bradbury, and Avonte Maddox, all three of these guys are technically under contract. I'm sure when they thought this up and they drew it up, they probably thought about continuing or carrying these 3 guys into the 24 season and this being kind of the last straw, the last year of that secondary. But I do think that now you had to fire, defensive coaching staff. You had the downward trajectory of some of the players in that staff. I do think now you might see an acceleration of decision dates with those guys. And I think that's the first, kind of decision they have to make in the offseason. By the way, guys, I'm not predicting they will or won't do anything. I don't know. I'm not in the room. You know what I mean? Like, I do know that there's going to be a cap hit with a guy like James Bradbury, but after your June 1st designation, you can make that cap hit manageable, right? You're going to have an effective loss there, but they got to make a decision on what they're doing with this veteran group of guys. Past that, we have the young guy we just drafted last year in Kelee Ringo, and then we have our young dudes that we are developing as undrafted rookie free agents, guys that we brought in over the last couple of years who, I got to be honest with you, I think the scouting department has done a phenomenal job of identifying these guys. No matter what we think about them, the fact that these dudes made an NFL 53-man roster, contributed at least on special teams, and the vast majority made their way into a football game, that speaks to how freaking well those dudes did their job, guys. That ain't easy to do. They went out there and actually identified dudes that can play in the NFL who weren't drafted. That's tough, man. So you got Eli Ricks, Mekhi Garner, Mario Goodrich, Josh Jobe. All those dudes are part of that conversation, right? So that's the youth movement back behind everybody where they got to make a decision between the guy we drafted in Kelee Ringo and the guy that we played a lot in Eli Ricks. The guy that we were high on going into the season in Josh Jobe, and then the young dudes of Mekhi Garner and Mario Goodrich. Like, are any of these dudes gamers? Or are these specifically third, fourth? When I say third, guys, I don't mean nickel. I mean like the main backup outside corner. For these special teamers and like could be the main backup guys, or do they have potential to step in one day and play, kind of a starting role? they're going to have to decide that between that grouping of guys, right? Like some of these dudes now are kind of coming up on that decision date, right? Like Josh Jobe has got 2 years in the league. This will be his third year. Like now you kind of have to know that about him, right? The other guy I want to talk about is Tawan Mullen. He's a guy that we signed to a futures contract. I don't know a ton about him. He looks like, just judging from what I can see here, he's either a nickel corner or he's a field side guy, one of these, speed movement types. He's not a big physical guy. I mean, we'd have to see how that would fit inside of Fangio's system. But he's a guy there. Then, of course, we're waiting on the exemption list release for Isaiah Rodgers. He's the young man that is a great special teams player. I mean, this dude would be a difference maker as a kick returner or punt returner. He's big, big time in terms of special teams. He is, traditionally speaking, actually played outside as one of the main backups in Indianapolis as a field corner, right? Covering the field, think Darius Slay. But he has the size profile and the movement skills. When you go and you just scouting and coaching, guys, the things that we do behind the scenes, there's certain movement skills that kind of link and tell you where a guy should play. I think Isaiah Rodgers has the movement skills. Now, footwork, I got to see it in game. The movement skills lead me to believe that he could bounce inside as a nickel cornerback. Like he has that type of ability, right? I do think that he's athletically gifted enough to do that. And to be fair to these guys that play nickel cornerback, they're worth every dime you freaking spend on them. I said last week that I think playing cornerback is one of the most underrated aspects of football, and I think they're actually the best athletes in football, and they're not ever recognized for what they can do. But I think playing nickel cornerback and have to play through traffic like that, I think that's an entirely different skill set, and it's requires you to be athletic. You have to have a tough nose, can come up and play the run, right? You got to be able to work through traffic, so your footwork's got to be impeccable, and you have to have fast reaction skills. And by the way, even if you're 5'8" or 6'1", if you're inside as a nickel and you're matched up on the tight end, you're probably outsized anyways. So it really doesn't matter. Like you're already going to have like incredible instincts to play that. And I do think Isaiah Rodgers is a guy that I don't know where he's at after missing a year of football, but what was on his film from Indianapolis when I was watching this guy, I'm like, dude, that dude has the movement ability to be pretty dang good inside as a nickel cornerback. I think he's really good like that. This is what I'm saying about the back seven being complex, guys. Linebacker, Nakobe Dean is the only real guy that we have under contract because he's a drafted player. He's a drafted commodity. So this will be year 3 of his contract, right? Everybody else that was on the team was really signed to 1-year deals. So it could be back in theory, but I don't know personally. I can't say one way or the other, guys. I don't know, on that back seven. But the only guy that's under contract past that is Brandon Smith. I believe Brandon Smith was a Penn State product. So we have Brandon Smith. We have Nakobe Dean under contract. We signed Terrell Lewis to a futures contract, and he's kind of a hybrid. So Terrell Lewis is kind of one of those guys that could play off ball, but I think he's thought of more as being an on-ball kind of edge presence or an on-ball Sam type, backer. So, I mean, we'd have to see how they plan on using Terrell, Lewis, and whether or not that guy's even good enough to contribute at a certain level here in terms of like making the 53. Those are questions I don't have the answer to right now, guys. I mean, I have to physically see this guy compete to know that. But, I mean, when you look at the back seven, guys, I mean, think of the names I just read here. It's complex. I mean, they need physical bodies at linebacker. I'm not saying it has to be in the draft. I'd prefer it to be there. I still think we need to keep continuously, taking stabs and trying to get that right. But, I mean, they could sign some free agent guys at linebacker. I've heard some names mentioned. We physically need bodies there. Like, we just don't have bodies at the linebacker spot right now. And then I look at the safety room, and it's like Kevin Byard's one of the few guys that we have on roster in terms of cap ability who we're able to do something with and actually get cap savings. Now, there's 2 options here. Number one thing you could do with a guy like Kevin Byard is that they're like, look, we want a veteran dude back there. Vic makes these dudes really good, is that you could take his contract, restructure it, and you could kick some money down the road, guys, right? You could take some of that base salary and convert that into bonus option money. Then basically what you can do there is then spread it out over a few years to do that. They could absolutely do that to get cap savings, or I'm pretty sure he's one of the few people we can cut. I don't know if it's with a June 1st designation or not. I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's probably with a June 1st designation to see some of the savings I've heard reported. But I've heard that we could get back as much as $13 million against the cap if we were to let him go. Like I said, guys, I'm not making a prediction what they will or won't do. I'm just basically explaining what the options are. They can restructure that contract and, obviously add a year or 2 to his contract and then kick some of that money down the road so that way it's manageable. The things they've done repeatedly here in Philadelphia. Or they could just say, like, look, man, we appreciate you. We're going to go in a different direction, and, we're going to go into the draft, or we're going to go into free agency. We're going to identify guys that maybe Vic wants. I don't know how Vic feels about Kevin Byard, right? I mean, I don't know how Joe Kasper feels about Kevin Byard. I mean, I don't know what those guys' thoughts are on the guy. So I can't say. And then, we had the young guy in Tristan McCollum, whose brother played in Seattle, who's a corner, Or no, I'm sorry, his brother played in Tampa. My bad. His brother played in Tampa, and he kind of, I said Seattle because he kind of fits that idea, the tall, lengthy kind of Seattle type deal there. And that's interesting in itself and what they do there. Now, for a split second, I want to go and talk about Clint Hurtt, and I want to talk about the defensive line. And then we'll kind of get into some more of the coaches if you guys want to, or I'll do some comments, guys, and we'll go into where you guys want to take a conversation. But Clint Hurtt, he was a defensive coordinator the last couple of years in Seattle, but he's a defensive line coach. And I mean, he looks the part, right, guys? I mean, if you drew up to me what a defensive line coach looks like, he looks like every offensive line or defensive line coach I've ever played for. They were mean. They yelled at us. They got on our butts when we weren't lifting hard in the gym. I can tell you guys a funny story to where I was at the squat rack, and I wasn't exactly putting forth a lot of effort, guys. And we had this young man named Coach Leach, who was a former NFL player that coached on our staff at Garner, and he caught me doing that. And it wasn't pleasant, man. He made me get into what they called the front leaning position, which is like basically when you're not bridging, but like in the push-up position. And I had to hold it for like 45 minutes. It was not fun, guys. He strikes me as that type of guy. Clint Hurtt strikes me as that big, physical, intimidating presence. Different when you're dealing with grown men that are football players, but you get what I'm saying. He strikes me as that personality type. I will say that I don't, just like I talked about offensive coordinators, guys, when you are a defensive coordinator underneath a defensive-minded head coach, I don't know how much of the scheme is yours truly and how much is that head coach's, right? I know you're responsible for calling the plays if you have that duty. You're the in-game manager, but I don't know how much of the scheme, the nuts and the bolts of the install is yours. Like that's complex, right? And that can be different percentages just depending on the coaching staff. So you're probably asking like, hey, what does that got to do with Clint Hurtt? He's not calling the plays here. That's true. But what I'm alluding to is that the fact that Seattle ran a hybrid 40 system. It's called a 4 under. It's a 40 under. So you're talking about a 4-3 under, right? And that basically allows that 3 technique to really get upfield and rush, which would be a really, really good thing for a guy like Jalen Carter and Milton Williams. These athletically freaky dudes who can really get after the quarterback. I mean, that's a good thing for those dudes. However, I don't know that if that's more of a Pete Carroll thing. Is that more of a Clint Hurtt thing? I don't know what Clint Hurtt thinks about things, right? I don't know what Vic Fangio is going to think. I mean, Vic's more of the traditional 30 guy, right? To where he plays that hybrid 30 and 40 fronts where he'll go in between them. So we'll have to see how that kind of comes up as we go along, guys. I mean, I don't know yet. I mean, we probably won't know until we can physically see them on the field and see how they're playing their fronts, and I can break it down with tape. But that's something to think about. Like, are we going to see some underfronts like the things that we saw in Seattle to where we're going to utilize the athleticism of a guy like Milton Williams and Jalen Carter to really get after it, Then you got to ask yourself, like, what is the role of a guy like Jordan Davis if we go to a 40 under? Like, it's going to be like more of a 2-eye technique type thing, but how often will they play him up over the nose, right? I mean, that's another kind of aspect to it. And to be fair to Jordan Davis, I mean, dude's a big guy, but you keep that guy fresh and you let him rush from a 3 technique. Like, he's not a nuanced pass rusher, but he's strong and fast. People underestimate that, but a 350-pound dude that's faster than me off the line, off the ball, that's a nightmare. It's a nightmare down there. But yeah, guys, I mean, I think there's some very interesting questions right now with the defense in terms of the structure of what the nuts and bolts will be, with Fangio kind of teaming up with Clint Hurtt, bringing in a couple of guys from different organizations in the back end who have worked with him before. Christian Parker worked with him, I believe, in Denver. And then you got Joe Kasper coming over for Miami. Kasper already being in Philadelphia before, so easy kind of, fit here for Philly. It's going to be interesting to see how they get this thing all worked out, guys. I mean, that's going to be a really fascinating aspect of what happens here, to be honest. All right, guys. If you want to talk about, let me get some comments, and after we do the comments, if you guys want, I can tell you a little bit about free agency, what I think may or may not happen. I know there's one big name. I clickbaited into the title. Obviously Patrick Surtain. I can talk a little bit about the contract structure, what it looks like. I'll tell you guys what the rest of the league looks like, and then we can have that discussion of whether or not there's enough cap space to even do something like that. I mean, I think there's always cap space. It's just whether or not the player would be willing to structure the contract to fit the cap narrative. You know what I mean? I think that's more of it, more than anything, but we can have that discussion, guys. All right, Jazz, what's good, bro? How you doing, man? Say, hey, Gate, good to see you back, man. Hey, I appreciate y'all coming back, guys. Big Birds, what's up, man? He said, yo, Gate. What's up, FTO? How you doing, bro? Jazz said, question, as far as you know, is Vic still running a 34? Great question, Jazz. We kind of covered that, right? With Clint Hurtt coming over here with the Pete Carroll background, like, are we going to see more of a 4-3 under? I don't know. I mean, that's a great question, Jazz. I don't know, to be honest, until we see it on the field, but I get where you're going. Like, Clint Hurtt is not what we think of, at least. I mean, I'm sure the guy has experience coaching 30 fronts before, or has the ability to do it if he doesn't have experience. Like, it's not that hard, but I mean, his bread and butter has been underneath Pete Carroll running that 4-3 under. So I don't know. That's a great question. Jose say, yo, Gate, do you think Jordan Davis is a bust, or do you think he was worth the pick instead of Hamilton? Jose, I got to be careful here because I'm on a record. You guys can go back to the draft videos, and I like Jordan Davis a lot as a player, and I think I understand why the Eagles made the selection, because the type of front we have been running, you have to have that dominant nose. But I'm on the record saying I have a hard time believing that a nose tackle is ever going to be worthy of a top half of the first-round draft pick, unless they have to be, just an absolute killer. They got to be a difference maker. With that said, I don't think Jordan Davis is necessarily a bust. I just don't know that people ever be happy about the pick in terms of that. Like, I don't think he's a bust. I think he's been pretty good. I still think we have questions about his conditioning, Jose. I think his conditioning was better this year than the year prior, but I still think there's growth there. I still think he needs to work his trajectory upwards to 45 to 55% of all snaps being productive. I still think we're in that role. He's a big part of whether or not we will be successful, but I think it's too early to call him a bust. What's good, Mir Sly? How you doing, bro? Jordan, not a bust. I don't know what y'all be wanting from defensive tackles. He was amazing until after the Bills game. He chased down Josh and saved the game. Not that Hamilton bad or anything, but y'all acting like Jordan do nothing. I'm just going to say nothing. What's good, Dante? How you doing, bro? Hi, Linda. How are you? My guy P.I. said peace and love, Coach Gorilla Gates in stream. What's up, NFC East Beast? My guy Mir Slime in the house. What's up, buddy? Bro, I think we should sign 2 safeties and draft one because I don't want to go through what happened last year, the bad tackles and guys playing soft. The secondary concerns me a lot there with that Mir Slime, with that ability to come up and actually tackle off of these screens. I think any smart team should just challenge the crap out of the Eagles secondary until we prove otherwise. Now, I will say that if Isaiah Rodgers gets cleared, the dude played physical. He's a guy that I think could be a difference maker in that regard. I do think that once they stuck Kelly Ringo in there, I think Ringo got his nose involved in the football, and you saw the physicality tick up. I think Reed Blankenship is a hitter. I think he comes up. I think he does a pretty good job, but you're right. And in terms of the outside corners in particular, Darius Slay and James Bradbury, I like those guys. I'm not here to try to talk down to them or talk smack, but this guy's kind of played a little soft at times. Let's be honest. What's up, Stoney? How you doing? Dante says it's kind of a loaded question, but lack of D-line production. Was it scheme or players? I think it's a little bit of both, Dante. The reports were coming out that Hassan Reddick and some of the other defensive linemen were having some indifference with the defensive coaching staff here in Philadelphia. I don't know if that impacted their ability to get after it. I would hope that's not the case, and it was more so due to injury or just, the secondary not being able to keep anything in front of them, essentially. And then even when the ball was kept in front of them, they couldn't come up and rally and tackle. I hope that was more of what was going on, but I think the safe answer to that, Dante, is probably a little bit of both. Philly D say, hey, what's up, Gate? Do you have scheduled live shows? Yeah, we're going to try to do them every Monday and Wednesday, guys. I'm going to try to come on and just do at least an hour or so, just kind of talking a little bit. And then it'll give me time to do like maybe 1 video or 2 videos a week where I can just break down, potential prospects, whether that's inside of the draft or free agency or, what's going on within the roster itself, some of these back end guys. I would sign Kareem Jackson as a depth player. He be hitting, he gets suspended, comes back and still hits. Just go all in, huh? What up, Cody? How you doing, man? Aleem McNeil still shaking my head. Yeah, that was the complication of the Milton Williams pick, right? PI, that was when we thought we could trade backwards a little bit and still get Aleem McNeil. And I think Howie was was right. He just didn't anticipate that Detroit would jump him given the opportunity. So, I mean, like, he was kind of right, but yeah, I mean, his plan B was a pretty good one with Milton, but yeah, I mean, Aleem McNeil was their original target. Yeah. Big Bird said, Gate, should we extend Milton this season? Personally, I want him extended ASAP. They got some decisions to make. That's for sure, Big Birds. I mean, I think that if you've got a young guy that knows the role, knows the fit, and you know, if you're, especially if we're going to play an underfront, a guy of Milton Williams' ability, that's a big deal. Like, I mean, I'm not opposed to it personally. Dante said the back end of the defense was a result of scheme or players. I like Ringo and Ricks, or is that fool's gold? Hard to say right now. I think Ricks did a lot with what, I mean, he was asked to play all over the place. So I'm trying to be, fair in how I evaluate him, Dante, because they asked him to do a crap ton, to be fair. I mean, he was asked to play nickel, then play outside. I mean, they had that guy moving all around the field. I mean, he pretty much played all three alignments in terms of the defensive backs outside of safeties, the two, safety spots. It's tough, man. I think Ringo was a little, wasn't quite there at the beginning of the season, kind of picked it up as the season went on. So, I mean, we'll have to see where they're at come camp time. Jose say, what are we going to do with Bradbury and his contract? I know we have to get a replacement. Will we cut him and eat the dead money? Let me just, before I give an answer, let me look up James Bradbury's actual contract and just see what they're reporting is the actual dead cap hit. And then that'll give us an idea of whether or not, it's feasible to even do that. I'm going to go to Over the Cap first, and I'll take a look at Spotrac. So Over the Cap says we're 2024, so let's go with we'll do, I guess, a post-June first and see what that does. So post-June first, it looks like we get back. No, we eat about $4 million, it looks like. So, like, I think we can basically come out of this with only eating, like, what's essentially guaranteed in terms of the prorated and based on that. It looks like we just get away with that and eating that salary, which is not much. If we traded it, let me see if a trade post first would do anything. I mean, you got to find a trading partner, and with this contract, it's very unlikely. Yeah, so trading wouldn't help anything. We'd still be eating some money on that. So, I mean, like, we're not eating a ton, but you're going to eat a little bit of money. Pre-June 1st, I doubt that's going to happen, guys. He would have to be labeled because it's like 10.9 mil. That's what we'd be eating. I think post, it looks like you pretty much break out even. So, I mean, he's still going to be on your cap, but it's not going to cost you any additional money over the cap on 24, it looks like. At least that's what's being reported from Over the Cap. So, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do, guys. I can't say that I have a feel on what they're going to do, Jose. I don't know how they're going to treat it. It's complex, man. Corners over 30, man. I've always been a pretty big James Bradbury fan, but when age catches you on the outside at corner, it's just no hiding it. Sav said how he thinks all you have to build is the line. This is why he should focus on numbers and let football guys build the team. Cody said, I'd sign Chin if they get rid of Bayer, to be honest. I like to see, but money-wise, I don't know if that's smart. We also got Sidney Brown out for most of the year. I do believe in Blankenship. We also need depth. What coach hire are you the most excited for? Defensively, I want to see what Clint Hurtt does on the defensive line. I want to see how that impacts things with Clint Hurtt. I don't know that we have the guy yet at linebacker coach yet, but, I think Vic's going to be fairly successful in the secondary. It's still going to be a matter of passing off. They have to communicate, Dante, and pass off. That's what's killed us when we've gotten beaten over the last 3 years, is when communication has been bad. Jess, I understand the philosophy on running back, but the aversion to safety and linebacker mystifies me. It's the new NFL, man. What do you think of Sidney Brown? Athletically gifted as crap, still has a lot to learn in terms of coverage technique, to be quite honest. Athletically gifted, though. Very athletically gifted young man. Coach, hey, let's get Surtain in here. Sign a safety and edge rusher, then draft for needs. Good to see you back in it. What's up, Drew? How you doing, man? I honestly think the round we drafted Milton was a hit. I'm happy with what we've seen from him. I think he can go up another level. He's definitely should be here long-term. I hope they keep him here long-term as well, just because you still need to have that depth guy. You need to have that third or fourth guy. You also need to have that guy that you can have trust in if a guy goes down for a few games. You need that dude that you can be positive as can get the job done. Maybe if true defensive end disappeared from view, there will be more money to throw in those directions. Jazz said Milton is very underrated. Think he shows out this season. Yeah, I think so too. I think that a lot of people are disappointed that the sacks haven't come in waves for him yet, but I think people got to remember they didn't really come for Javon Hargrave in waves yet either. Like it was after he arrived in Philly that he started putting up those crazy numbers. I think Milton Williams has that type of pass rush ability as he's just really quick off the ball. What's up, Carlos? He said, Gates, salute. I'm really enjoying what the Birds done so far with the coaching. Welcome back, Deuce Staley, running back coach now to buy the right groceries to add to this team. Give me Kool-Aid. I hear you. SEC, man, I would just keep drafting in the SEC. Any top free agents you think we absolutely signed this offseason? I think there was that report, Jose, the two guys from Miami. One was a safety, one was a linebacker. I mean, when you really look at it, it makes sense in terms of the connection back to Vic Fangio. I think those two guys, I don't remember their names. I think one's like Van Ginkel or something like that, the linebacker. I think he's like a linebacker edge type. I could see that one. I can't remember the safety's name, but I do know that I think he came out of Baltimore to Miami. He's a guy that I think makes a lot of sense as maybe a third, fourth guy in terms of the rotation and depth. I mean, they're going to bring in their own guys. We drafted wide receiver Worthy in the second round. We'll have to see, man. That's a tough one. What's up, Green Wingman with the $20 super chat? Appreciate that, Green Wingman. He says, which player do you think will benefit the most under Vic Fangio's system? That's an excellent question. Benefit the most. Whew. I think somebody in that secondary is going to be the one that's going to benefit. I just don't know who it's going to be, Green Wingman. I don't know that we had the answer yet. I don't know we have the answer yet there. Yeah, I don't know we have the answer in terms of what the secondary is going to be. But I do think a secondary player, just the way that Vic Fangio plays things, is going to have a big season. I honestly think if Slay stays here, if Slay still has the foot speed, which it looked like he did, now he got injured. And I don't know what that injury is going to do above 30. What's he going to be, like 33, 34 guys? Like, got to be a little cautious here. I mean, I still remember guys like Champ Bailey playing pretty effectively in their mid-30s, but got to be a little careful, man. When that age catches you, it catches you hard on the outside. But he's a guy I think could have a really big season. If you get an instinctive safety, like if Reed kind of keeps developing those instincts back there, he's not a big speed guy, Reed's not. But if he can develop those instincts to where he could trap quarterbacks playing in that Fangio system, I think he's a guy that you could see have like 3 or 4 interceptions. Jazz says, watching Ojamo. Yeah, I like more Ojamo. He's a good player. I think he's a really, really good 4th, 5th defensive tackle. I like the way that young man plays the run. Van Ginkel, great hair game. I heard Chin or safety from Denver. Which safety? Carlos, you talking about Simmons or they got a couple out that way. Should we try to pursue Saquon or just prioritize signing Swift? I think that answer has to be given by the coaching staff. I mean, that's who I would be consulting if I were the Eagles front office, is to figure out how the run game is going to be implemented on the season and what type of back is the best fit. And then you got to let the front office do their magic in terms of the contractual thing, because I don't know what Saquon's going to demand, to be honest. But to be fair, I guess you can make the same argument, Jose, that we don't know what Swift's going to demand. Swift had a pretty good season. He had career highs here in Philadelphia. So, I mean, I guess we could look at it both ways there. Jazz said he thinks the Giants might franchise Barkley. Deshaun, yeah, exactly, Slim. Appreciate you, bro. He said Gink and Deshaun Elliott are who you're referring to. How he somehow swings those moves. We're in business. I think Slay has 2 more good years in him. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, Slim Reaper. I appreciate you. I think Milton and Jalen is going to start dominating next. It's up to the secondary and Vic getting these corners to hold up. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Fletch. Fletch seemed pretty non-committal in terms of coming back next year. So I'm curious of where he stands on things. Carlos said Isaiah Rodgers is going to be our Surtain under Fangio's system. He's athletically gifted. I'll give him that. Young man's got the movement skills. That's for sure. You think we move Reed to linebacker? In my opinion, he's too slow for safety. I think he's a little undersized for linebacker. Simmons, number 31. So you heard they won't franchise him? Whew. I've been doing lots of research on Josh Huff. If the Jets don't re-sign him, I would love to get him. He looks like a Howie guy, and he's had a good season. Yeah, I think any of those under-the-radar guys, Mir Slime, that's what I'm going to transition into, is kind of talking about what I see from a free agency perspective, like what is actually on the market. And there's a couple of under-the-radar names that strike me as being interesting. The first one is a division guy in Kendall Fuller. I think that Kendall Fuller is one of those guys that is not an all-pro. He's not like top of the league. He's none of those things. But what he is just a solid football player. He's a guy that, especially if you're uncertain about having that third guy, or if you want a competition, or you want Kaylee Ringo, or you want, Eli Ricks, or you want one of those guys to earn their way onto the roster mirror, I can see a guy like Kendall Fuller being that dude that you bring in with not a lot of risk there, right? I don't think he's going to demand a huge contract. So he's a guy I like in terms of the free agency market. He's more of I'd say a safety net or a security blanket more than anything, but I just think he's a solid football player. He's not special. He's not elite. He's just a very solid player. I think, for me, the year that we actually went out there and we got Steven Nelson, I think Steven Nelson's a decent player, but I was kind of wanting Kendall Fuller that year. There was another guy I was on here looking at. I was like, you know what? If the Eagles want to take a shot, they want to take a swing. Not Jeff Okudah. C.J. Henderson, the young man from Carolina. A lot of injuries. Like, no guarantee that dude will ever make it through a 17-game schedule. However, if you want that low risk but high reward type thing, I think a guy like C.J. Henderson, young corner, injury history is very shaky. He's already on his second team. He was originally drafted with Jacksonville, got traded to Carolina. If Carolina walks away, I think that's a very low-risk guy that has some upside to him. I think, when you're in the free agency market, I just think you got to be looking for those type of guys. Like, you got to look for those guys that you get to hit the home run with. I don't know if they will, but, I hope that they take those type of approaches. Then you have the names that people are talking about in terms of trades. And we'll get into that in a second, guys. Slim Reaper said, who was more impressive to you and you feel more comfortable replacing Bradbury if we move away from him? Ringo, Job, or Ricks? I honestly feel like Ringo, despite his size, and he's a big dude. I mean, Ringo's like, 6'1", 6'2", like 210-ish. I mean, the dude's got the size of a freaking boundary corner. His arm reach isn't as impressive as I thought it would be, to be honest. There's Slim Reaper, but, man, I thought he was pretty impressive playing the field side. I thought that he played better in space than I thought he would. Playing in space, the tricky part there is if your footwork's flawed, you can be taken. But once he got in there, I thought he was decent, actually. I was like, man, I didn't expect Ringo to be this good this early. I thought he played well. In terms of the boundary, I think Job or Ricks is your guy. In terms of playing that boundary side, if you're going to do that internally, I think those are the guys that have the appropriate length to play with. I think that, you got to be a little bit more aggressive if you're Fangio. You need to let these guys not mirror. Mirror means you get up like you're in press, but then you're just mirroring the actions of the receiver off the line. They did that with James Bradbury, and it didn't work out. I mean, I just think it's terrible to do that. And I know that the NFL is getting real tricky about putting your hands on players, and it's difficult for defenders to do that. But I think if you're going to do that, then disrupt the route pattern. Physically put your hands on the player, disrupt the route pattern. You're not trying to get those guys to carry 25, 30 yards down the field with them. The point is disrupt it and not allow the timing of the play to get you beat like that. That's my thought, Slim Reaper. I don't know what they're going to do there personally, but I like the guys that have a little bit more weight to them. And I know that that's the thing with Ricks is he's not the biggest dude in the world, but he plays big. But he's got that 6'2" longer wingspan and arm reach kind of frame to him. I think he's got the in coverage. I think he's got the attributes. Jose said, "What improvements do you think the offense needs besides the coaching?" The they've got to figure out that they need to create free releases, man. There was too many times that teams they picked up on if they just fall back into a zone and put enough guys in the coverage. It's really hard to beat that if you're dropping 7, 8 guys in coverage. I mean, if Jalen Hurts isn't really a threat to run and gain 5, 6 yards on you every time to just break you down and quarterback slide out of the pocket, then that's a problem. And I think they need to create free releases for if teams do that, then you're designing your offense to get ahead of that, to beat that. I don't think they did that enough. Always entertaining. People said, what are the chances we go after Terrion Arnold? I don't know. I mean, always entertaining people. It's hard to say, like, because it's a new coaching staff. And we got to keep in mind, not only is it a new coaching staff always entertaining people, remember how many losses we've sustained to the front office now over 2 years. So I don't know necessarily what's in Howie's ear. This is going to be an interesting year to see the dynamics there. You know, to see the dynamics in terms of like the trusted guys that Howie goes to. You know, he's still got his analytics guys, but Henry said, didn't we already have a guy named Josh Huff a few years ago? Haha. Yeah, the wide receiver. Reed is bigger than Nakobe Dean. I'm just saying maybe not the worst idea. I don't know, man. I don't think he's bigger than Nakobe, to be honest. We should have to move up. What's up, Drew? Sorry, guys, if I'm a little nasally. Yeah. Carlos said Howie needs to make the right moves. Round 1 is imperative. Also, some of those picks to either move up to get another first for next season. That first pick is important. Howie has to hit. They got a few top 100 picks this year, so we'll see what they do. Bradbury to safety and Blankenship to the inside linebacker is an option I'd look at. If it doesn't work out, oh well, but I'd check. I wouldn't do that personally. The backup plan, I think that there's some physical limitations that are more than just weight related. Nakobe might be a sub 6'2" linebacker. He might be sub 235 pounds, the things that are what is considered the prototype for linebackers. But even for a shorter stature guy, he does have longer arms than you would think. I think when you start playing these lighter guys that are also not the longest in terms of that arm reach, it's really hard for those guys to stack and shed those linemen. I think you're asking for disaster with a 205-pound, 210-pound, safety up there that doesn't have, number one, the movement skills and the experience playing that, but then number two, doesn't have the physical attributes in terms of the arms to actually get guys off of him. Like, normally speaking, what you're looking for from that spot, and talking about like the minimals that most teams, and every team's a little different, but the prototype's normally like a 6'2", 235-pound guy that, generally speaking, has above 32.5-inch arm reach. And a lot of teams kind of really lean towards that. They want those 33-inch arm reach or higher type players. Now, the Eagles have gotten by before on guys that are sub 32-inch arm reaches, even if they had the physical size. TJ Edwards, believe it or not, even though he was the prototype in terms of being like 6'2", 240-ish, he was a sub 32-inch arm reach guy. We've had a lot of those guys in the system, but outside of, a player like, TJ Edwards, a lot of those guys don't work out in run support. You make yourself very, very susceptible to the run game. Henry said, sorry, guys. Henry said, I think Isaiah Rodgers will make a major impact next season. I hope so, man. What are your concerns that you have with the formation of this coaching staff? A lot of names. I mean, the names are impressive, right? I mean, we got the names. So, I mean, you can look and say, like, hey, they went out there and they got experienced guys. They got guys that have called plays for a few years now. Vic Fangio's a long-term guy. You look at Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore's an experienced guy now. However, I think the thing you have to look at is that there's a structure to the organization in terms of what they believe in and how they want to win these games, what they think is effective in terms of the analytics. And I think we have to be honest and ask ourselves, like, how much of last season weighs in on their thought process and makes them go, we do need to refine some of the things that we look at as a whole. from the head coach to the front office. I think they need to come together and have that, come to Jesus moment, if you will, about the structure, the overriding big picture stuff that influences your scheme, influences the install of your offense and defense, influences each weekly game plan you have, influences the play calls, like those overarching things. I think that's the bigger thing, Green Wing Man. How do you feel about the release of Avante? Did they release him, Dante, or is that just rumored? I don't know. I didn't know that they released him. I think Avante Maddox is a really good football player, Dante. I think he's one of the better nickel corners in the league. But at the same time, he's been injured. It's tough. I think the dude's super talented, but at the same time, I think he's also been super injury prone. And that's tough, man. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to think there, because I had to know the backup plans. The plans were not very good when he left the lineup, right? Which stinks, because I thought Roby just didn't have anything left, apparently. But we saw Roby's impact in one game. We saw that, if you get a guy that's experienced but still has some leg left, can still do the job, we saw immediately that defense was better in coverage. I don't know, man. It's going to be tough, Dante. Sirianni, wingman. He cannot turn fast enough to keep up with those wideouts. What did I miss? We're just talking about the structure of the defense. We talked a little bit about the hires that came in unspoken. We were talking about Vic Fangio coming in as the play caller, coming in as the coordinator. The fact that it's interesting that he picked Clint Hurtt to be down there as a defensive line coach, and Clint Hurt's impact coming from Seattle and, Pete Carroll. We were talking a little bit about, is Clint Hurtt coming in here to run a 30 front with, a hybrid 30 into the 40 here and there, or are we going to see more of the Pete Carroll 4-3 under stuff? We're kind of talking a little bit about that. Then we talked about the back end, the secondary. We talked about Joe Kasper as the second, safeties coach, and then I can't remember the young man's name from Denver. They just picked up Christian something. Let me see his name real quick, guys. Christian Parker. He's the young man coming in from Denver to coach the corners. So, that's, that's kind of like we picked up there. And then we talked about the fits in terms of free agents and stuff like that. Stavian Count says, I think we keep forgetting we have the one player from the Indianapolis Colts come on and off the suspension that can work the slot. That's Isaiah Rodgers, and that's what we were talking about earlier, Stavian. We were saying that he has the movement ability. But believe it or not, he's not a slot corner. He actually played as the field side. He played what they call more of the open field areas. So think Darius Slay's role. That's what he played there, is kind of more of the third corner that would step in. When I say third, not meaning nickel, meaning the main backup in Indy. That was the role he played there, but he has the movement ability. That's what I was insinuating, is that just my time spent coaching and scouting the game. Everything about Isaiah Rodgers' movement ability strikes me as a guy who definitely has the athleticism to play as a nickel. Just doesn't have a lot of experience yet. Anthony said, yo, Gate, what up, Newcastle in the house? What's good, man? How you doing? I really wonder what this kid, Cooper DeJean, can be in Vic's system. Dude gives me Harrison vibes from Minnesota. If you get a guy that can be that kind of impact on the inside the secondary, I'd be all over that. G Dragon said Derrick Henry at 4.5 mil. It's got to come down to the coaching staff, guys, and how they build the offense. G Dragon. I can't say how effective it would be. Of course, Derrick Henry's a good player. But the system's got to make sense in terms of the volume of carries for the player and how that would work with the rest of the playmakers we have on the team. I think they need to figure out a solution in terms of pass protection. I don't think the pass pro was very good last year. They need to be a little better there. Personally, I think from the running back spot and just from 6-man protections in general, not just the running back. The running back is part of a 6-man protection, but you guys get what I'm saying. In general, we had a couple of really noticeable moments to where either the line slide was wrong, or the principles within the line slide were missed by players to where they're supposed to be in terms of their responsibility of picking up pressure. So, something was off a little bit with our pass pro last year. Surprising, too, because we only really replaced one player on the line of scrimmage. You know what I mean? Top player in the draft you think the Eagles should pursue? I haven't really worked out like my draft list yet, Jose. Because we're picking 22nd, it's kind of no man's land in terms of the first round. So I need to get a feel for post combine what I think is going to be the flow of the draft, who I think might be there, and what the value might be if we got back a little bit, or who I think might be like a guy that falls between like the 9th pick and the 16th pick that maybe we can get up from 22 to go get. Like, is there a guy out there that I think that the Eagles just need to go get this guy? Like, that's going to be an impact player. Like, I got to have time to see that. I got to go through everybody's tape. You know, there's so many guys. Like, normally during draft season, Jose, I go through at least 100 players. So I watch tape on like 100 different guys. I normally only get a chance to watch 3 to 4 games. So I got to really be selective with which games I watch, just because pure volume and the fact that it's just myself. You know, I kind of have to lean on some of the guys I know within the community to help me out sometimes in terms of like guys I can't get around to. So like, you know, I'll use guys like Jalen Williams and Caleb and those guys that are former collegiate players that have been watching tape on dudes to give me a little insight, because I just can't physically watch everybody. Reed's 2 inches taller than Nakobe, but maybe 20 pounds later, just have Reed gain 10 pounds. It's more than just the weight behind the butt, man. There's physical elements to it. Nakobe's not 200 pounds to backup plan. That's way under. He's not 230. I mean, they list him at like 230. He's not 230, but he's bigger than 200 pounds. Bradbury was awful, always entertaining people. Yeah, he was definitely awful. Brown played amazing when he was playing linebacker. You think we move him there for good? No. So when you see those type of plays, guys, you got to understand it's a hybrid position. It's not pure. So you're playing either a star concept, what they call the star, or you're playing a rover. There's some principles of why they, you know, one's called star, one's called rover, but it's a hybrid spot. It's not a pure linebacker spot. You wouldn't want to put him up on the line like that to where it's not in a hybrid role. Like, it would be a problem. He would get pushed around a little bit. All I'm saying is the positionless player is still very popular. A safety playing linebacker isn't unheard of, and they're the same size or smaller than Reed. There's no linebacker smaller than Reed, man. That's incorrect. I understand what you're saying, but they're not positionless. It's a hybrid position. They're called stars and rovers. This is the meat and potatoes draft. No specific target, but they need a class of contributors. Yeah, I agree, Jazz. I mean, there's got to be the back end roster guys they got to hit. I thought they did a fairly decent job, like I said last year. You know, Moro Ojamo was just really good, man. It was such a good pick in the 7th round. Like, man, it's tough, dude. It's so tough to like get those picks right. And I thought they got the 6th and the 7th round picks pretty dang right. You know, I think McKee's a good backup quarterback. I think there's some potential for that guy as a backup in the league. And I think Moro Ojamo could be a really good 4th or 5th defensive tackle in the league. Like, I think they got those things right. I think we should trade down a few times just to load up and get more talent for next year. This year, we don't have too many holes to fill, but next year it might be worse. So we are going to need more picks. I could see that point to it, Jose, to where, you know, they have a decision to make this year. Do you rip the Band-Aid off this year and start the rebuild, or do you do it next year? I think that contractually, the way they set up Bradbury and all these guys, Maddox and Darius Slay, is that they were looking to 2025 being that rebuild year. My question is how do they view the dudes on the back end? You know what I'm saying, Jose? Like, that's what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about guys like Kelly Ringo and Eli Ricks and Mekhi Garner and Mario Goodrich and Josh Jobe and Isaiah Rodgers coming off the commissioner's list, hopefully. And then you got Tywan Mullen, who's the guy they just signed to a futures contract. Like, Tywan Mullen and Isaiah Rodgers are two guys. I don't know Tywan Mullen's background. I got to look that up, Jose, to be fair. But I do know that just looking at his testing data and looking at his size, he fits as a nickel. I don't know if he's ever had experience there. And then Isaiah Rodgers, like I said, he hasn't traditionally played the role. But I'm just telling you from what I saw on tape, Jose, and, you know, just my experience of coaching these guys and recruiting them, that he's got the movement skills. I don't know if it would work out, but I think he definitely has the movement skills. So like Tywan Mullen and like Isaiah Rodgers, could they fill in to move a guy like Maddox? Like when do you rip the Band-Aid, basically? You know what I mean? Like I think that's definitely part of it, man. And then you have the new coaching staff coming in, which is another big one. You know what I mean? Like that's definitely part of it, man. Like I don't know how to do that. How they're gonna judge that, if you will. Green Wing Man with a $10 super chat, man. I appreciate you, buddy. You said, what's your confidence level in Sirianni in making game time decisions on Sunday? Feel like the Jets and Seattle game was lost due to poor game awareness, poor game management. I agree with your assessment on absolutely the Jets game. I have to go back. I remember we lost on the last second touchdown in the Seattle game. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I got to go back and remember the circumstances, Green Wing Man. I don't want to say something in it like me not fully remember the circumstances in Seattle. I thought that they went a little off script from the play call, if I remember the Seattle game right, but I need to go back and watch that again and make sure that what I'm saying is correct. You know what I mean? But I do think in general you have a point that Nick's role is supposed to be game management and it's supposed to be the administrative role, but he was dabbling a little too much in the play calls and stuff at times. He was dabbling a little too much into situational. He's got to be involved in it, but you also got to have trust. That's what I was saying Monday, Green Wing Man, when I was doing the live stream about the offense. And I said, it's just like working any other job. You could be really good at your job. So I'm talking about like Brian Johnson. I'm talking about these young coaches we just let go, right? You could be really good at your job and know how to do your job and be very talented. Be a true up-and-coming coach. Be a true up-and-coming employee, just like any other organization. But if you walk in through those doors and the culture is just not a good fit for you personally, you're kind of screwed, right? Like if the culture is not a good fit for you, you're screwed there. And I feel like that's one of the tough things about this business. So my point in saying that is like, I think on paper, Kellen Moore, experienced play caller, former quarterback, Brian Johnson had experience too, but Kellen Moore in the league having experience. Vic Fangio being a long-term guy, like it's going to come down to the relationship between Nick, Kellen Moore, and Vic Fangio. Do you trust your guys the same way you trusted Gannon and the same way you trusted, Steichen to get it right? You know what I mean? Like if we get that kind of relationship again, I think this could be better than people think, right? I don't think we're the same talent we were in 22 and 23, but I do think that there's still elements of this team in certain respects we're even more talented, but maybe not the complete roster, if you will. Like I do think the back seven, there's some serious question marks right now. But with that said, like that to me, that's the thing, man. Like that's the thing about it, right? Like you got to like really be aware of what that relationship is. Like I can't predict it. You know what I mean? Green Wing Man. Like I don't want to say something and then like it's so hard to predict relationships. Like, and I gave the same answer to Dallas fans too, Green Wing Man. I know a lot of those guys that are in content creation from Dallas and they were asking me my thoughts. And I was like, look, I don't know what that, I don't know what the relationship's going to be. I can't say what the relationship was between Jason Garrett and Kellen Moore. Let's keep in mind, I think Jason Garrett, towards the end of the 2019 season, took away play calling from Kellen Moore and got fired. And then Mike McCarthy comes in and doesn't really get the chance to pick his offensive coordinator, gets kind of told they want to keep Kellen Moore in that position. So I can't say what the relationship was with those two coaches. He goes to the Chargers and he's got a defensive-minded head coach. So I would assume that while there are going to be perimeters and boundaries to what you can do, it still has to be within the structure of your head coach. You still have a lot more freedom, right? There's a lot more, freedom and lateral movement there in terms of your ability to do things. It's just got to be in the structure what your head coach says. That relationship's going to matter, man. That relationship's going to really, really matter. I think Howie stays, Howie free agent back seven or day 2-3 drafts and drafts defensive line, offensive line, wide receiver day 1 and 2, unless there's someone who screams best available. I mean, historically speaking, PI, you got a point. I mean, historically speaking, I can't argue it. You're right. Historically speaking, they like to take defensive line, offensive line, and wide receiver in the first round. I mean, that's been the trend recently, at least. Now will they buck the trend? I think a lot of us are hoping they will. I mean, it's been a long time since we drafted, cornerback up high like that. I mean, I think the last time was like 17. But yeah, I'm hoping, man. They released Avante and Dallas Goddard crowed. Well, they're like Goddard and Avante are really good friends. They're close. Remember, they used to live together. Jazz, that's a good point. Goddard has no ready replacement. Yeah, I still think they're trying to figure that one out too. I agree with you there. I don't like the 34 for our roster. We hate it. Hassan and Josh dropping in coverage, or do I have the wrong idea? They're not dropping his coverage as much as people think, Dante, to be honest. It's a handful of times on the season, to be honest. With that said, they have a weird mishmatch of players. They got guys remaining from 43 over systems mixed in with this 30 front stuff. That's why they're running a lot of hybrid stuff. You remember it took some convincing for Gannon to get the guys to stay committed to gap and a half type things. I mean, Clint Hurt's going to be interesting. You know, we talked about 4-3 under versus over versus 30 fronts, but we didn't even talk about the gaps. 1 gap, 2 gap, gap and a half. Like, what the heck's he going to do? Dante, I mean, they could run variations of things, right? I mean, Staley, when he went to the Rams as their defensive coordinator before he took the job with the Chargers, you remember they ran that hybrid 30 Eagle front, that 34 Eagle front, to where they would bring down. It's like it mimics a 50 front, but they one gap with those dudes. So, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, Clint Hurtt, that's why I said he's a very interesting hire. He's the guy that, like, I'm really, really interested to see what happens with him. Cornerback, safety, punt returner. Rodgers also has return ability. Yeah, he's a really good returner. Isaiah Rodgers is a good special teamer. Kick return and punt return. Expect roster movement. Yeah, something's going to happen. Something's got to give, right? Melvin, what's good, buddy? So what's up, Coach Gates? We pick up Shaquan Davis. Do you think we move up to the to be third wide receiver next season? I think they need it. I think they need a third wide receiver, Melvin. I mean, I really, really am disappointed in the way that things turned out with Quez, because there was a moment in time where it looked like Quez could be something. And boy, did it fade over the last 2 years. I'm disappointed, man, because Quez has a ton of ability. He's got a ton of talent. He's just super inconsistent. super, super inconsistent. I do think that they need to find a solution at the third wide receiver spot. They need someone who's elusive, someone that can take advantage of the fact that they're going to see primarily they're going to be singled up in coverage. So, I mean, they need that guy. I said Reed was 200 and Nakobe's around 215, 220. I think you typed it backwards in your thing. But, yes, I agree with your assessment that Nakobe's about 215, 220. I would say he's in that area. Always entertaining. People said, who do you see the most future superstar potential from from out of all the young guys? Jalen Carter easily is the guy that I think is definitely going to be a superstar. Always entertaining people. Like, that dude is really good, super good. Now, I guess what you're saying is, like, don't be so obvious, Steve. Let me think for a second. Who we've drafted over the last couple of years and who might break out for the Eagles. I don't know that Milton Williams has the obvious playing time in terms of the path forward to get those type of production numbers, because even if he's a starter, those reps are going to get split. So I don't know he's going to get like double digits unless he just really turns it on. But I think that dude's really underrated. Let me think. I think Jordan Davis is good at his role. Just conditioning's got to be better with Jordan Davis. Star potential. The back seven is a question to me. That's just a question mark. No, it's too. I'm not going to say, because Devontae's already a star. There's really no one in the running back room or tight end room I like that much. I'll tell you this. I know everyone's a little down on what they saw last year, but when Cam Jurgen takes over at center, I think that dude's going to take off, always entertaining people. I think that's a dude's going to be better than people think. I think people forget how bad Isaac Seumalo was for so long until he got really good. I think Cam Jurgens is going to be that type of player to where he's going to get real good. What's up, Fisher? How you doing, bro? He says, this is the best Eagles podcast, the most substantive. Appreciate you, man. Very true. Mister said, Google says Kellen Moore runs a modified West Coast offense. Are you talking from Monday's conversation, Mister? Yeah, the thing, like, that's what I was saying, Mister. And you play collegiately, so I know you know a little bit here. It's so hard to piece together responsibility of an install when you're an OC underneath a head coach that's offensive minded. I mean, we know that the guy had the role of the call, play calls. So he was managing the games. But I just don't know how much of the installs in any of these were his. I mean, all the guys that, like, his quarterback coach came up underneath Scott Linehan, right? It's Jason Garrett. There's that side of it. But then his last few years, he coached under Mike McCarthy. Then he goes to the Chargers, who are traditionally a West Coast group, even though it was his offense. I got to see more of that Chargers tape, Mr. Sandman, to see what he was trying to do there. So, yeah, that's one that confuses the crap out of me too, man, just in terms of, like, is he going to use the West Coast abbreviated style of nomenclature for the playbook? I'm curious about that. Or is it going to be more traditional, like Frank Reich and those guys run? They run more of the traditional nomenclature for the playbook. That's going to be interesting, man. I don't know how I have the answer, Mr. Sandman. Like, you notice how, like, I'm being a little skating around it, to say the least. Like, that's a hard one to pinpoint right now. I think people think about the system. I think there's going to clearly, the whole league runs West Coast offense concepts now. But that nomenclature of how they do the playbook is important, because that's going to impact Jalen. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing I'm paying attention to, is how's this impacting Jalen. Yeah, I agree with your assessment on the Jets game. That's how I remember the Jets game as well. I'm talking the Seattle game, for whatever reason, man, it's just not clicking in my head, the exact sequences. I remember the touchdown that, clearly we lost on. But I need to go back and rewatch that game to remember the way it all kind of unfolded in the fourth quarter. You think we go after Barkley or Josh? I don't know that they're going to spend that kind of money. To be honest, that's my only hesitation. Saquon's a great player, man. I think the issue is the Eagles have been a little iffy on spending big time money at the running back spot. They need to do something, man. Jazz said more play for Chris Peterson at Boise State. Yeah, which adds to the confusion, Jazz, because Chris Peterson ran they call an identity-less offense, right? Like, he basically went by matchup. A lot of the key words you hear from Nick Sirianni, a matchup-based offense. That's the same thing that Chris Peterson ran pretty much at Boise State, which is probably some of the appeal to get a guy like Kellen Moore in here, that I guess a lot of the front office people view that as being, amendable or moldable to things, to build around the offensive concepts for your quarterback and receivers and what they like. The one noticeable thing that I saw, Jazz, from the film is that he used a lot of motion. He created a lot of, stack sets and free releases and things like that. But I could say the same thing about Brian Johnson when he came in. That's my hesitation is like, it's all on Nick. Like, how much do you just allow your offensive coordinator to do his thing, man? Like, if I'm in Nick and I'm in Nick's situation, man, I just tell him the handful of things, concepts I want run, and then I get out of the way. I let this man do what he's supposed to do. But I'm not Nick, so I can't say what that young man's going to, what he's going to do. I'm calling Nick a young man. He's actually a little older than me. But you get what I'm saying. I hope Nolan can get a little bigger and have a bigger role. Yeah, I mean, that young man was really good in run support. Even though he's underweight, that dude's instincts they showed out in run. Saquon Barkley would help Hurts in so many ways: passing, rushing, the short yardage, lessen the wear and tear on Hurts. Like I said, we were talking about earlier, guys, we also need to figure out six-man protection. Like, the running back's got to be better in protection. Sorry, guys, if I'm a little nasally, as I got like one of those little colds, man. I know they won't play Reed at linebacker, but he's the right height. If he gained 15 pounds, he can easily fit the size requirement. I mean, inside linebacker, not pass rusher. I would say the other thing to consider about that backup plan is, outside of just physical stature of the arm reach and stuff not being right, Reed's had a lot of he's got a very complicated injury history dating back to his time at Middle Tennessee State. He's played safety his entire life. That's why the minute Reed stepped onto a field, Reed did really well as an undrafted rookie free agent. As a guy we brought in, he was experienced playing it. He's, spent 6 years at the position alone at Middle Tennessee State. I think when you start messing around with that kind of stuff, man, you got to be careful with that. But the main point is they need about at least 2 or 3 linebackers, depending if they keep Cunningham. I don't know what they're going to do there. I mean, Zach Cunningham, when he was healthy, was a really good player. I thought that, speaking of a guy with really long arms, 34.5-inch arm reach, like 83-inch wingspan, that dude was just a nightmare when he dropped into zone and was out there disrupting throwing windows, and he was really good against the run. However, the problem with Zach Cunningham and a lot of these linebackers is that when we go man and they have to man up, they've been a liability. I don't know that that's an easy solvable problem, though, the backup plan. I don't know how many. I think you almost have to know the personnel that's about to be played, you're about to be played against. And that's where you use that hybrid thing I was talking about, where you bring in the rover, you bring in a star concept at the safety spot, and those guys have a little bit more mobility in the hips to turn and run, to stick there. I mean, Sidney's a little raw. Sidney Brown's a little raw right now in coverage, but he's athletic as crap. He's got the athleticism, right? That's the side to it that's got to get better. Mr. Salmon said he watched a little bit of the Chargers film. Justin Herbert threw a lot of short and intermediate routes with more. One thing I liked was more integrated motion with the wide receiver screens. Nice wrinkle. Yeah, it did make it so stationary and obvious. P.I. said he thinks Fletch is gone either to a true 4D line team or he's going to retire. I think he'll retire. Yeah, I think he's going to retire, P.I. Yeah, I think you're right. I think if he doesn't come back, he's going to retire. I mean, he had a chance to leave this past season. I just think he thinks of himself as an Eagle. But yeah, I mean, I think he would be a true fit in a real 40, a one gap. Put him in a one gap system. I think that's where Fletch is good. Best content in Eagles Nation. Appreciate that, man. I never saw the talent with Quez Dropkins. Honestly, outside a few catches, he was pretty good on that 21 season, always entertaining people. You got to remember, this young man came out of a very college dominant system that was definitely had a long way to go. Did not play the majority of 2020, came in, showed his athleticism towards the end of the season. And by 2021, had at least got a control over the playbook and some of the concepts to be fairly productive as a number 2. So when they moved him and they were like, look, we got AJ here, we got Devontae here. I just thought that guy was a number 3 with the type of speed he has to take the top off of a defense. And then, the fact that he was progressing as a wide receiver from year 1 to year 2, I thought year 3 and year 4 was going to be a lot better. It just didn't materialize. I mean, I think the talent is there. I can't explain to you why it didn't happen. I don't know, man. I can't explain it. That's for his agent to do. But yeah, Ringo needs refinement, but has a higher ceiling. Yeah, I liked Caley, man. I thought he came in and played really, really physical. Watched a little Dolphins film. Vic Fangio had his D-line resetting the line of scrimmage and making plays against the run in the backfield. Must have been nice, huh? Yeah, I don't know what happened, man. We started off that way, mister, and then it came apart, bro. It came apart. Hit that like for Gate City. Hey, I appreciate that, guys. Ringo's probably the best hope we have to be a superstar, being that he was getting praise from the offense. Just got to keep developing. Dude's super athletic. Another one like Sidney Brown that has the athletic traits, man. Those dudes are gifted. Sometimes, like you just stand in all of the – not that the guy – athleticism doesn't make you a top-level football player. However, you still can look at a guy and say, like, dude, that dude is ridiculously athletic. Could be Henry at running back. Barkley would be a dream get, but probably not realistic. Henry could bang in short yardage, help Hurts. He knows how to pick up a blitz too. They definitely need that last part of what you just said. I would bet money they go after J.K. Dobbins at some point. Didn't they try to draft J.K., Invincible Swordman? And Nick is what worries me, coach. Yeah, I mean, my gut instinct is Nick's going to do the right thing, but until it's done on the field, it's just a gut instinct and it's not validated by anything of proof. You know what I mean? So the only thing we can say is like he did the right thing in 21 when he relinquished play calling and when the relationship was right between his defensive coordinator and his offensive coordinator, he did the right thing. So hopefully that's what I'm saying. That relationship piece is a really big part of it. Gates, what would you do? Sign Jeremy Chin out of free agency or trade for Surtain from Denver? What would they do with Bradbury? What would they do with Slay? Those are the ones that worry me, man. I don't know what they would do there, but I think you need to have that guy in Surtain. But I mean, Jeremy Chin is a free agent, so it's a little easier to construct that. You just got to figure out the contract. You got to figure out how you get a guy like that under a contract. He's a free agent. You're open to negotiate and bargain with him. You don't know where they are on Surtain, but I do think having a top-level shutdown corner for Vic Fangio's system is very important to run those concepts. I think Howie goes cheap on offense and invests a lot of resources into the defense between the draft and free agency, maybe a trade or two. I don't hate the idea, man. How will Kellen Moore's offense help / hurts? I think you're going to see more competency if he's given fully the reins over install when it comes to third down and the intermediate to long stuff, Allison. I think you'll see a little bit more of that. I think you'll see stack sets and free releases and all that stuff kind of going on. I think that's going to be a nice little touch to have a guy that we can trust to actually beat the coverage and actually get a play out there, because some of that stuff with the third down stuff is a little frustrating, to be honest. But that's where I think the improvements will be. How can he hurts is if the offense is just unbalanced. I mean, if we're just completely unbalanced again, it's going to be a problem. Sorry, the backup plan. I just need it. I need something real quick. I've been on this linebacker rant because I know we need much better linebacker play, but you kind of just made my point for me about replaying on the blocks covering tight ends. He's the biggest safety we have, but Byard lost it. Sorry, man. My freaking nose is killing me, guys. Can Mr. Wilson cover at the linebacker position? Yeah. They need to do something, man. Unspoken. That linebacker spot's going to be important. They got Brandon Smith, too. He's an interesting guy. Prototypical size, dude. I'd like to see if there's anything there. It's not a great look that he was available to put on the practice squad and able to maintain there, but I'd like to see if there's anything there. We know a lot on defense, linebackers, cornerbacks, at least one starting safety. Watch how he bring back Evans. Man, if you can keep Evans healthy, he's a good third guy. He's a good third in the rotation. Justin Evans. But he's the health, man. Justin Evans has had such a complex injury history. Quez never improved after year 2. Yeah, I agree, Invisible. I mean, we never saw that jump following that. I mean, he regressed, to be straightforward. Peyton Wilson is the best linebacker in the draft. His issue is the injury history. I know what you're trying to do there, Jazz. You know I'm an NC State guy. I like Peyton Wilson. I like all the state linebackers. They're good at developing linebackers at NC State. Early on in his career, he had some complex shoulder and knee stuff at NC State. He's been relatively healthy recently. Dude's super productive. Super productive player at NC State. I mean, you talk about blitz and pressure and what he did, double-digit sacks there. You talk about 48 tackles for loss over his career. I mean, the pass breakups and deflections he had. I mean, good player, but you're right. I mean, the injury stuff is always going to be a concern here in Philly. Plus, facially is a dead ringer for Goddard. Yeah, they looked at Dobbins in his draft year. I still try to trade for Chad Muma out of Jacksonville in a third inside linebacker. Should be cheap since they're 4th or 5th linebackers now. Yeah, I mean, anywhere you can find depth, I think you got the right idea. I think you got the right overall idea of the backup plan, which is you want to look for those guys that just need opportunity. Do you think it makes sense to let Swift walk for the comp pick and bring in a name like Henry or Josh Jacobs? Contractually, it depends on the contracts, right? I think the hard part about getting a name like Henry is what is he going to demand? Josh Jacobs is another guy that can be complex with the contract. I don't know what those contracts look like. Mr. Salmon says, I think Clint Hurtt can guide Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter to see their full potential. It looks like he can get down there on the field, Mr. Sandman, and take a couple of snaps. Guy's a monster. Yeah, I think that's the idea, right? Is they're looking at getting a long-term NFL guy that has the experience on the line, to kind of do that, to develop these young dudes. Because, I mean, it's more than that, right? I mean, you got Marlon Tuipulotu, you got Moro Jamo, Milton Williams. You got all these guys, right? I mean, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, they're all a little young, to be honest. None of them are, overly experienced, per se. Will Goddard finally be able to display his top 3 ability under a new coordinator and scheme? Oh, sorry. Always entertaining me. Let me actually pull the comment up. I hope so. I mean, the guy's a good player. I mean, talent-wise, there's not many players that rival his talent. What's up, James? How you doing, buddy? He says, hi, coach. Who you think will be the linebacker coach? Your thoughts on Trotter Jr. to the Eagles? I don't know where these guys are going to fall into the draft. I mean, it's kind of hard to really have a lot of insight there until following the combine. It's not that the combine like really affects guys. Maybe one or two guys I'll test so crazy that they'll move up the boards a little bit. But it's more so that by the end of the combine, you start seeing a little bit more of the inner workings in terms of the way teams are leaning. So you get a little, you can see those, who they set up to visit at the Senior Bowl, who they set up to visit at the combine, who they set up to, you get what I mean? Like, it gives you an idea which way teams are leaning in terms of those things. In terms of the linebacker coach, I'm not really sure, man. They've interviewed a couple of guys that, are long-term NFL guys, but, they didn't really hire anybody. So it's hard to say who they're going to, which way they're leaning there. Imagine how he does something crazy and snags Mike Evans for this offense. Be a lot of good receivers. Kool-Aid at corner in the draft. Not buttering you up, just how I see it. Appreciate it, Jazz. What's up, David? He said, I feel as though linebacker safety, but we also have a big pressing need at wide receiver 3. Agree with everything you just said right there. Yeah, the back 7 of the defense, including linebacker heavily, and then, wide receiver 3 is definitely a concern. And running back, we don't even know who the starting running back is at this point. All should be addressed in that order. Do you agree? Yeah, the order we'll have to see, draft valuation, where we're picking. I don't know what the availability is for trades and stuff like that. Davis, it's hard to say how they should do it, but I think you hit the nail on the head for each position of need. Cut Darius and James. We cannot afford old people getting burnt continuously, allowing other teams to sustain drives and keeping our offense off the field. Ali said, any draft picks, trades, or free agents that you'd be psyched about? So we kind of talked about this earlier. I'm not going to say psyched, Ali, but I talked about, I like the idea of bringing in a dude to push and compete the young guys. So if the plan is they're going to try to move Kaylee Ringo. They're going to try to move Eli Ricks into the starting lineup, Josh Joe, whatever. You got to make those dudes compete and not just against themselves. I would like to see a veteran guy with real playing experience and someone who can play at a decent level. We're not talking all pro. We're not talking about someone who's going to completely change the culture in the play per se, but a competent veteran that can push these dudes. So I was kind of talking about, in my opinion, one of the guys that meets that criteria that I laid out for you is Kendall Fuller. I think Kendall Fuller is that type of player. I think he can do that for you. Or I think you need to try to take a swing and a miss at a guy that has a lot of potential, but a tricky background. So CJ Henderson. Be on his third team, got traded after being a first-round pick, top 12, top half of the draft, from Jacksonville. I think he was actually top 10. To Carolina, and now he's a free agent in Carolina. So if they let him walk, obviously there's risk there, and it pertains a lot to injury. But I do think that C.J. Henderson is a talented guy. You know what I mean? Like, I think you got to take some risk. Obviously contract matters on this stuff, Allie. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not taking a risk where I'm guaranteeing the guy 20, 30 million. But, if the contract meets the demand and the need we have, I would go after those type of players. Sorry, guys. Somehow it jumped on me here. Lee said, do you think the Eagles use the available cap space to sign current players and go mid-tier in free agency? And do you think Justin Simmons could be a cap casualty that could be brought in? I would love to have him brought in. I don't know the complete, cap situation in Denver, so it's hard for me to weigh in on it, Lee. But, I mean, if he is a cap casualty and the Eagles can find a way of getting the contract, under control against the cap, then sure. He's a Vic guy, he's a Vic Fangio guy. I wonder how much more we are going to blitz now. Yeah, it's tough to say, man. I expect that we're going to definitely blitz more than we have done in the past. I definitely think you're going to see a little bit of an uptick. I've never been psyched about watching Frank Gore Jr. What do you believe is the possibility of us being able to get him, and where do you see him drafted? Like I said, it's really hard to weigh in exactly where some of these are. I will say that for running backs, it's really like the level of talent you need to be in today's game to go in the first round is pretty high. I don't know that I view him that highly yet. I mean, I got to look more at his film. I'm I'm not saying he's not going to go that high. I'm saying I got to see more film on that. I would say normally when you got a super talented guy, you're looking at the second round. Now, day 3 is the sweet spot for running backs. Anywhere between the 4th and 5th round is normally where you see these guys that end up having pretty good runs in the NFL. You can find them between the end of day 2 and round 3 all the way through to the early day 3 stuff, that 4th, 5th round. That's normally the sweet spot for running backs, 3rd through 5th round. With a few upper tier guys going, back into the 1st, into the 2nd round. Fangio, we're bringing extra, but who and from where will be the question. Yeah, it's true. What are your thoughts on Nolan Smith? Do you think he can replace Sweat after next season? I think it depends on the nature of how they play the front, Jose. I do think that Nolan Smith is a little bit more the Hassan Reddick on-ball Sam type, more so than a hands in the dirt down guy that's going to, play inside at times and flex a guy outward. I think if they're smart with Nolan Smith, you use his athleticism to the best of its ability, which means you make him a little bit of an alignmentless guy. I don't mind that guy being off ball and then walking his way up into the A gap or B gaps. I don't mind that guy being used outside as on ball like that, kind of flexed out as an overhang. I think you need to be creative with the way you use them. The more you can get creative with the athleticism of guys like Nolan Smith with Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick, I think the more success you're going to have. Mix in a Jalen Carter. Mix in, like those guys that are athletically gifted like that are just, Milton Williams. Do you think the magnitude of failure from this year will linger with any players? The line of scrimmage, always entertaining people. The line of scrimmage is where I would have the concern about that, right? Is that we pride ourselves on that. And we kind of got our teeth kicked in a little this year on the line of scrimmage. That's where I would worry about that, seeping in a little bit. But I do think that we have a lot of talent. So I'm confident that we're going to get it right just because I think the talent level is pretty high along the line of scrimmage. But if you do lose Kelsey, if you do lose Fletcher Cox, while we do have guys in the ranks ready to take the roles, those dudes are really high-level football players. That's where I'd be a little, you know what I mean? I don't know the depth would be the same. His dad was the best I was privileged to watch as a prep. Unlike Burnberry, Kool-Aid McKinstry can tackle, great athlete, can return kicks too. I like the wordplay, man. Like the video. Appreciate you guys. Your thoughts on White and Budda Baker on the Eagles? Look, any high caliber player is going to help. Any high caliber player in particular in the back 7 is going to help, to be honest. We need to do something about the back 7. There needs to be an infusion of talent. Age is a little bit of an issue we have in that back 7 right now. And then just pure numbers. So, I don't know what the contract situation will be, guys. I mean, Howie's a master getting things under contract, but the players got to be amendable to that, right? The players have to be open and approachable to structuring the contract in a way that makes cap sense for the Eagles. They're going to get paid. It's just a matter of will they agree to the way the Eagles want to structure that contract to get them paid. Mr. Sandman said, the NFL is a copycat league. What have you seen from the remaining contenders that you think the Eagles should emulate? Ooh, great question. That's a really good question, man. Motion in particular on offense and stacked, creating stack sets and free releases. I think we've got to be better about that, to be honest, Mr. Sandman. I mean, I know some people want us to run some of the stuff that we've seen from Shanahan and, these other guys, the young man that's out there with the Rams, where they like to put their quarterbacks under center and boot and move their guys. The problem is not every quarterback likes to run those play action style back to the defense stuff, because you do have to take your eyes off the coverage for a second to do that. Not every quarterback likes that. That's why so many quarterbacks want to be in shotgun. But that said, I mean, that's a separate issue from just motion, stack sets, like legitimately, paying attention to how teams are defending you. Like when teams start dropping 7-8, dude, you got to run. Like, it took us too long to get to that. We got to it. But, I mean, like, you got to run against that, right? When teams are manning you up and daring you to beat them, then create a free release for A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith or anyone to win. Create a free release for those guys to win. Like, it's stuff like that, Mr. Sandman, offensively. Defensively, the passive coverage, man. Look around the league and look how much teams are getting up and disrupting the route patterns and how much success they're having with it. I didn't love that about the Eagles, man. It's been going on for a few years with that, to where I knew coming in that Desai was going to be a little bit more aggressive with his coverages than what we saw from Gannon, but he used a mirror technique instead of pressing them. I don't love the mirror technique. Blitz answers would be nice. Yeah, having an answer to the blitz. All right, guys, I appreciate y'all. We've been on here for an hour and 25 minutes, guys. Thank y'all so much for rocking me. I'm going to sign off here, guys, because number one, I got to like blow my nose. But, man, I appreciate y'all. I'm going to get to always entertaining this question real quick, and I'm going to sign off. If and when used right, how far do you think A.J. Brown and Slim Reaper will go next season? Then potentially the next under the same scheme or coordinator? I think there's always going to be a pulling back. But I think you got three guys that are capable of over 900 yards of offense in Brown, Smitty, and Dallas Goedert. And I also think you got 2 to 3 guys that are capable of 10-plus touchdowns. So I think you can get 2 guys over 1,200 yards, 1 guy over 900 yards, and have all 3 dudes over 7 touchdowns. I think that's the capabilities that are possible with this type of offense. Will it work out that way? I don't know, man. All right, guys, I appreciate you. Jazz said, have a good one, man. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys Monday morning. We'll be back, guys. We'll do another stream. I'm going to take a look and look up some notes and just see what we can talk about on Monday. All right, y'all. Appreciate y'all.